Everyone needs a redeemer, and this is God's great love story as found in the book of Ruth. We get to see how a widow, a foreigner, and a bachelor bring God himself to his creation. Now, Ruth takes place within the book of Judges, and the book of Judges is characterized in the very end when it says that everyone did as they saw fit. And so we see in the book of Ruth that even in unrighteous times, that people can do what's right in the sight of the Lord. Now, the book of Ruth is great to read during this time of year. If you have strained family relationships that make awkward holiday meals, we get to see wonderful in-law relationships here. And in the season of thankfulness, it's only expressed fully through love. We're going to talk about that today. And Christmas is coming, and the baby in the manger needs a genealogy, and this book is there. Nothing else, it's getting cold out. And sometimes you need a good reading of a real chick flick, but it also has to have some macho and brawn in it. And we see that in Ruth. So I just want to review with you Ruth chapter 1. We saw mysterious blessing. Naomi, a main character, her husband Elimelech died, and her sons died. And now because she's husbandless and childless without a man to provide or continue the family name, she's looking for a redeemer. And Naomi, she helps us see that God's hand has been in everything. And it reveals to Ruth what I've summarized this way, that serving a sovereign God dealing the hand of calamity is better than serving a finite God dealing the hand of prosperity. Because the calamity just needs more time to ripen. And so we got to see God's great love begin to shine as we realize that she's not empty-handed, that Ruth is next to her. The problem is that this problem isn't solved yet, chapter 1. Naomi and Ruth, they need a redeemer. And so we entered into chapter 2, and we saw God's fields of refuge, characterized by Proverbs 16:9. In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. And so Ruth, she finds herself through God's handiwork gleaning in Boaz's fields, who is her relative and a potential redeemer. And now there's a solution possibly to Naomi and Ruth's situation. Boaz, he provides a band-aid to Ruth's problem. He provides provision and protection. And we got to see how Boaz became the hands and feet of God's refuge to Ruth and Naomi. It reminds us of what Dallas Willard said, that every contact with another human being should be one of goodwill and respect, with readiness to acknowledge, make room for, and assist the other in suitable ways. And so we were encouraged to do that likewise. But what Ruth really needs is a long-term solution, and that's going to come through the form of a relationship, and Boaz could be that relationship. That's Ruth chapter 2. It ended with this cliffhanger where we had to wait because it was to be continued. And now we're going to figure out if Ruth and Boaz are a match. Father, Lord, we come into your text this morning to worship you, and Lord, we pray that it would minister to the depths of our soul. Use me now, and use your Spirit in each of us to enlighten us. May we go out of here different than we came. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I've set up Ruth chapter 3 very specifically. How many of you have already read Ruth chapter 3 before you came? A few. Figured you would. I want to first set up the character of Boaz and Ruth. You need to know this as you enter into this chapter. And so here's a summary statement of Ruth. It's found in chapter 3, verse 11. It says this. There we go. All the people of my town know that you, this is Boaz referring to Ruth, know that you, Ruth, are a woman of noble character. She's an upright woman. And now Boaz, we read previously in chapter 2, verse 1, it says, now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And so we know that both Boaz and Ruth are people of character. Now recognize this, that according to the law, Boaz does not have to marry Ruth. Why? Because he's not a brother-in-law. Okay? I told you last or 2 weeks ago that I found this statement that summarized what I've been hashing out, that when and why the Jewish people connected the law of kinsman redeemer with the law of Levirate marriage, it's not clear to us, but that was the custom, at least in Ruth's time. But even if it's the custom, Ruth is what? She's a Moabite. And because she's a Moabite, even the social pressure, the customs of the day are off of Boaz. He does not have to redeem her. So now I want to show you Boaz's love for Ruth. Boaz's love for Ruth. I've got 4 reasons why I see Boaz has love for Ruth. In chapter 2, verse 20, we see that Boaz is still single. It says that she, and this is Naomi, added, that man is our close relative. He is one of our guardian redeemers, and so he is single. In Ruth chapter 2, verse 8, we see that Boaz was older. It says in verse 8, so Boaz said to Ruth, my daughter. And so he's got to be thinking, will I have a son to carry on my name? Is God going to provide me with a wife? Chapter 2, verse 11, Boaz already had his mind on Ruth before his eyes even saw Ruth. In verse 11, it says that Boaz replied, I have been told all about you, Ruth, what you have done. See, it was love before first sight. As Boaz wonders if Ruth is God's gift to him. In chapter 2, verse 17, Boaz's actions show more than just mere duty. Verse 17 says, so Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. Then she threshed the barley she had gathered, and it mounted to about an ephah. That's about 30 pounds. That's not normal. That is sending a message to her and Naomi. The message is that he's in love with Ruth. And I want to show you Ruth's love for Boaz. We're going to read this is verse 3. I'm giving it to you in advance because you see, Ruth, she is ready to move on from her public mourning. And so Naomi says to Ruth in verse 3, wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Naomi, the mother-in-law, she sees that Ruth's heart has moved on. And in the second half of verse 10, it says, you, referring to Ruth, have not run after young men, whether rich or poor, implying that she could have had a younger man, implying that she could have found a richer man, but she didn't even pursue them. She didn't even inquire if there was a younger redeemer, a richer redeemer. Why? Because she's in love with Boaz. You see, I believe there's a love relationship going on between Ruth and Boaz. This is not just mere duty. And so why then does the narrator use provocative language? I believe to show us 2 things. To show us 2 things. One, we might not get this here, but they sure did when they read it. That Moabites can be saved by a redeemer too. You see, the original listener hearing this language being used would not be able to escape the memory of Genesis 19, Lot's daughters. Verse 37 in Genesis 19 says, the older daughter had a son, and she named him Moab. He is the father of the Moabites today. The original listeners, they cannot escape the memory of Genesis 19. And so this sends a big message. Secondly, to show us that Boaz and Ruth are growing in real love. It's more than mere duty. Boaz does not have to marry Ruth. He wants to. But will he? That's the question. And what we're going to see in Ruth chapter 3 is loyal love. Loyal love. Hesed. We're going to talk about Hesed. Hesed, it describes a special characteristic of God and the people who are faithful to him. It's translated in our English Bibles oftentimes kindness or loving kindness, but it means so much more. than just those simple things. In English, you'd have to wrap mercy and love and grace and kindness and bind them all together in a word, and we just don't have a word that comes close to it. But we can understand Hesed, and we can display Hesed, as you'll see here in Ruth chapter 3. God displays us Hesed. He helps us understand Hesed, and we're going to see Ruth display Hesed specifically in verse 10. So, we're going to dive right in with verse 1. This is the planning of a proposal. If you have planned a proposal or helped in that, it is a big deal, okay? I need to know, this one here, this is not necessarily abnormal for the time. Okay, the parents influencing the engagements. In fact, I'd say it's wise today if parents are involved in the engagement processes. Why? Because parents know what marriage takes. Parents know their children. And they can see the difference in their child, whether they are in love or they're just in infatuation. That's wise. Little relationship advice for you here this morning. You'll see it throughout the text. Verse 1, the planning of a proposal. One day, Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, "My daughter, I must find a home for you where you will be well provided for. Now Boaz, with whom woman you have worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know that you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do." "I will do whatever you say," Ruth answered. We get to see two changes in Naomi here that are really vital to see. We get to see that she has love for Ruth. She began thinking outside of her sorrow of the last 2 chapters, and she's moved past it. And now, because of that, she's getting active in their situation. She's becoming a participant in what's happening. And so Naomi, she is releasing her daughter-in-law from continuing the mourning of her son. And that's why she says here that she's to wash. That is, that she's doing a physical sign that communicates a spiritual cleansing. And she's anointing herself with a pleasing aroma, even though she wouldn't have needed it. She just took a bath. And most importantly, she's removing her mourning clothes and putting on her festival clothes. In doing so, Naomi, she is giving her blessing to Ruth to seek a husband in Boaz, who Naomi knows very well may be the Redeemer for them both. You see, that physical change in Ruth's attire would communicate to everyone who saw her that she's done mourning. She's ready to move on with her life. She's available to be wed again. The plan is sort of twofold. You think of it this way. The big themes of the plan are this. The plan is for Ruth to make it absolutely obvious to Boaz that she would like to be his wife. And she will. Now that's a good plan, okay? Because even though us men want our brides to think we know it all, we don't read minds. This is a good plan. Make it completely obvious, Ruth. Secondly, the plan is to be done in such a way as not to put undue pressure on Boaz. So the plan is going to be executed privately, only involving Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz. And that's good because it's not normal for a woman to pursue a man, for a young person to propose to an older individual, for a field laborer to propose to a field owner, or to a foreigner to propose to a citizen. Naomi may in fact be wondering, why hasn't Boaz pursued Ruth? And maybe there's a reason. And so this plan is respectful of Boaz. It protects everyone involved if it doesn't work out. It's a good plan. Make it obvious. Be discreet. And so, he is winnowing and he's threshing. And these are the finishing processes of making the grain, the harvest. It requires going outside of town and using the evening winds to blow away the chaff from the grain. And because it's of high value, the harvesters often slept with the grain to protect it from theft. And so the plan is this. 1, make it obvious through appearance. Okay? In our day, you think of it this way, the wedding ring is off. It's a sign. I'm available again. Secondly, keep it private. Okay? In our day, you think of it this way. This is to be a PM, okay? A private Facebook message. Don't put it on their feed. All right? Keep it quiet. And then these women, you see here that they absolutely trust Boaz to do what's right before God, even if the answer is no. Those are the 3 elements. Well, let's see how it goes. Verse 6. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned. There was a woman lying at his feet. Now, a test of a man's godliness is not what he does on Sunday morning, it's what he does on Friday night. And you need to know here that Boaz is a godly man, and nothing immoral is going to happen today in chapter 3. There's a number of reasons for that. One of them is that there's key words that are missing to draw that conclusion. Key words are missing. You see, the plan is working. And we have a little bit of relationship advice here from Naomi. She knows, okay, she's been married to hardworking men. She knows that hardworking men are more cordial after our thirst is quenched and our stomachs are full. Plus, Boaz had a really good harvest, so he's in good spirits. So Ruth is on the scene, but she's not making a scene. And Boaz finds a quiet place to sleep, and Ruth watches where he goes. Boaz is snoring away. Ruth sneaks up, uncovers his feet. She lays down, and now she's just waiting for the coolness of night to take effect. The night goes on. She's completely awake. Boaz is still sound asleep, but eventually his feet get cold. We've all been there, right? He begins to stir in a stupor. He's trying to get his feet covered back up when suddenly he senses something's not normal, and he's wide awake, trying to figure out why a woman is lying at his feet. So he asks a very good question. Verse 9, "Who are you?" he asked. Brilliant guy. He gets a response. "I am your servant Ruth," she said. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family." Whoa. Maybe you didn't pick this up, but I think Boaz, he probably needs to pinch himself and make sure he's not dreaming, okay? Because let me bring these things to make sense to you, that Ruth and uncovering Boaz's feet, it will come up, yes, but it's more than that, because submissive servants uncover the feet of their masters. Why? Because you can't wash your master's feet if you don't uncover them. So she's approaching submissively. And now, Ruth, yeah, she made it as clear as it could be. All right, Ruth, good job. 2 thumbs up. When she says, "Spread the corner of your garment over me," this is referred to in Ezekiel 26, verse 8. She's saying, through Old Testament symbolism, "Will you marry me, Boaz?" Clear as day, right? Clear as day. The garment, the same word, is used of the wing, and so she had been seeking refuge from the wings of God in chapter 2, and now in chapter 3 she is seeking refuge under the wing of Boaz, reminding us, and him, Boaz, you're a redeemer. If it ain't obvious, I'm asking you to marry me, and you're the redeemer. And I don't think there was too much of a pause here, because it may have been long for Ruth. I get that. Seconds can be really long if you're waiting. But my guess is that Boaz had already thought this through. You'll see. Look at how he responds. "The Lord bless you, my daughter," he replied. "This kindness, or this Hesed, is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do all that you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Now, Boaz, that's a long answer. A simple yes or no would have sufficed. But it's looking good so far. He said, the Lord bless you. Don't be afraid. I will do what you ask. And he mentioned about Ruth being Hesed. And then all the people in the town know that she's a woman of noble character. You know what bothers me? Especially if you've read through this story, Boaz, listen, buddy, stop calling her daughter. What's going on here? Well, it's very likely that Boaz, he's a generation older than Ruth, and yeah, it frustrates us, but it wouldn't be in their time. But why has Boaz been so hesitant? Why did he wait till the end of the harvest season? Well, let's find out why. Verse 12. Although it is true that I'm a guardian redeemer of our family, there is another one who is more closely related than I. Uh-oh. Now there's a complication. There's possibly another man on the scene. What are we going to do here? And so he says, stay here for the night. And in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good, let him redeem you. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning. Now we know why Boaz hasn't been making his move. However, now because Ruth has initiated the process of redemption, Boaz, he can now begin the official moves of this process. And it begins by asking this closer relative if he wants to redeem Ruth. So now we got to wait again. Apparently, this closer relative isn't just around the grain pile, so Boaz can't be like, hey, buddy, you want to marry Ruth? Apparently he's in town, so going to have to wait. This story is full of suspense, isn't it? It is. It's great. Now what we do know is this, that Ruth will be redeemed. And that's the important thing, because Boaz makes an oath before the Lord to redeem Ruth if this closer relative will not. And so verse 14, she lay at his feet until morning, got up before anyone could be recognized, and he said, no one must know that the woman came to the threshing floor. He also said, bring me the shawl that you were wearing and hold it out. When she did so, he poured into 6 measures of barley and placed the bundle on her. Then he went back to town. They both reclined on the grain pile there, waiting for dawn to appear. Ruth wondering if she will be married to Boaz or this other redeemer. Boaz wondering if Ruth is his bride, or if he will be waiting again. Both trusting in the Lord in Hesed. Ruth going back to her mother-in-law with 6 scoops of grain, or possibly just what her shawl could hold without breaking or being uncomfortable. And Boaz, he's heading off to town to initiate the process of redeeming Ruth. Verse 16. When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, how did it go, my daughter? When she told her everything Boaz had done for her, and added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Now this is good news. This is a good action. Now we know why Boaz sent the grain. He's sending a message to Naomi. It's a visual of what God is doing in her life, because she said that she came empty-handed in chapter 1. And notice the reply. And Naomi said, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until this matter is settled today. Now, you may be thinking this is tough on you. All this waiting around, the suspense of the story. But I can remind you, Ruth, she's not getting no Twitter feed and updates on Boaz's trip to town. She's really waiting. There's no text messages. It's just this waiting and this trusting. It's faith that they've got. And so we're left wondering and waiting to, will this Redeemer come? And we're going to have to wait till next week. Lord willing, we'll be back together on Sunday and we can do chapter 4. But I'd like to show you through the examples of these people, the main characters, some things that should characterize us. They are examples to model after. You see, even in unrighteous times, God's people can do what's right in the sight of the Lord. And Ruth is a great example to women. The Hebrew Bible, it was a little different than our Old Testament in the order that it was set up in. And it's very likely that Ruth came right after the book of Proverbs. Well, how does the book of Proverbs end? Well, it ends in Proverbs 31, verse 10, talking about the type of woman to aspire to be. A wife of noble character, who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Is there an example? Yeah, Ruth. Chapter 3, verse 11, the same word is used. All the people in my town know that you are a woman of noble character. You see, this gives women an example to model after Proverbs 31 and being exemplified through Ruth. And for the men, as for Boaz, looking to learn and be like him, you see the trust that Naomi has in Boaz, the trust this mother-in-law has for Boaz. She says, he will tell you what to do. Not all men could be trusted in this situation, but Boaz, he can be trusted in this situation. He is a man of his word. She says in verse 18, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. Naomi knows Boaz is going to follow through. They're characters that men can live up to be trustworthy in situations that maybe aren't the best, and to follow through on our word. There are also great examples of righteousness here. Very simply, just doing what's right. Doing what's right sometimes takes on two forms. It can take on what I would call a passive righteousness. That's righteousness that only happens by convenience. It'd be like this. It'd be like saying, well, I didn't get drunk, but the reason you didn't get drunk was because you ran out of booze. Okay, that's passive righteousness. It's sort of by chance it just happened that way. You notice here that Ruth isn't waiting around wishing someone would come give her food in chapter 2 or take notice to marry her. No, she knows God's ways and she's pursuing them. She's gleaning in the fields and seeking Boaz. The problem with just being passive in your righteousness, that often James 4:17, the sin of omission, takes place. It says, if anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. That's the danger of passive righteousness. I'd encourage you with active righteousness. That pursues what's right according to the Bible, regardless of its consequences. We see that with Boaz. In verse 12, he says, although it is true that I am the guardian redeemer of our family, there is one more closely related than I. You see, he has Hesed for God and for Ruth that's causing him to do what's right, even if it costs him losing Ruth forever. That's love. That's Hesed. Be active towards your righteousness. Why? Because it's more effective than just being passive. Being passive, it doesn't work when it comes to doing what's right. You have to be active in it, because if it's just passive, then often it causes sin, and it doesn't help you live out the purposes of God for our lives. You see, purpose, it provides vision for us. It provides hope for us. And without that, basically the Christian life, it becomes depressed, and churches begin to decline in the atmosphere. Be active in our righteousness. There are also great examples of purity. We know from the New Testament, 1 Thessalonians 4:3, it is God's will that you should be sanctified, that you should avoid sexual immorality. Boaz and Ruth did avoid sexual immorality, plus Boaz protected Ruth from the evils that are often committed at nighttime in darkness by saying, lie here until morning. And they rejected every kind of evil, like it says in 1 Thessalonians 5:22, when he says in verse 14, no one must know that the woman came to the threshing floor. Nothing happened. But he doesn't want anyone to think anything did happen. They're above reproach, like 1 Timothy 3:2. It's a characteristic that all of us are to aspire too. They're great examples. A woman of God, a man of God, living a righteous life and being pure. We also see what it's like to wait. We know what it's like to wait, like Ruth and Naomi and Boaz. Before we came to Christ, wondering if there is a Redeemer. Naomi tells Ruth to wait. Sometimes we have to wait. Sometimes there's seasons of life and in our relationships where we wait. In our job situations where we wait. With our children. And we wait. Maybe wondering if the college letter is going to come back accepted or declined. This kind of waiting, it reminds me, it's one of the things I don't like. You ever be sitting on an airplane? I'm a mere earthling, Dwayne, so I don't fly, I get to ride. And you're just sitting there on the tarmac. And they've already closed the cabin door, so you can't use your cell phone. It's on airplane mode. You have to be buckled in because you're technically out on the runway, so that you can't use the restroom. You're just stuck there. They don't even serve drinks. You're just stuck. You're just absolutely waiting, and there's nothing you can do but wait. We have seasons of life like that. Isaiah 64:4 says this. Since ancient times, no one has heard, no ear has perceived, no eye has seen any God besides you, who acts on behalf of those who wait for him. Wait actively. When you're active in your righteousness, you can wait patiently, and waiting is worth it. Waiting is worth it. We can wait in that trust of the Lord in our relationships and our job situations with our children and wondering where our future is going to go. So wait wisely. Lastly, display Hesed. I will not give the word Hesed justice. I can't using the English language, but we can learn it. Okay, here's a simple definition. Royal love. The word is directly used 3 times in the book of Ruth. Ruth chapter 1, verse 8. May the Lord show you Hesed, as you have shown Hesed to your dead husbands and to me. Ruth 2:20. The Lord bless him, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. He has not stopped showing his Hesed to the living and the dead. And here, Ruth chapter 3, verse 10. The Lord bless you, my daughter, he replied. This Hesed, this kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You could have run after younger men, whether rich or poor. You see, Hesed, it motivates our actions beyond duty to the benefit of others without considering personal benefits. I'll say it again. Hesed motivates action beyond duty to benefit others without considering personal benefits. That should characterize all Christians. Mark 12:33 says, to love him with all your heart, with all your understanding, with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. It is more important than all burnt offerings and sacrifices. You see, God, he wants more than just mere lawful duty, because our world needs mercy. And we can learn it. Matthew 9:13 says, but go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have come to not call the righteous, but sinners. You see, God, he is Hesed to us, and our relationship with God is to be one of Hesed. Our relationships with each other is to be one of Hesed, and we can be Hesed to the world. That's Ruth chapter 3. A beautiful display of Hesed.